One thing that you didn't get to go out to, it looks like,
Waitress?
well, folks, it's 3 o'clock. So if we take our seats and find a few board members, we could begin. But we'll begin without and ask that we call the roll call, which I will assume the responsibility for. If I get it wrong, please correct me. Sharon Tucker.
Present.
Jim Williams.
Present.
Ken Castleman.
Present.
Marty Seifert.
I'm here.
Ben Eisbart. I'm here too. So we do have a quorum. I'll entertain a motion that we adopt the agenda.
So moved.
And may I
Second.
have a second? Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed by nay? Let me welcome you all to the special session of the Board of Library Trustees on this April 7th, 2020. Today is a red letter day. Well, it's National Library Week, so this couldn't fall in a better circumstance. But we're here to receive the Facilities Master Plan as presented by our consultants, Boswick Design Partnership. A minor housekeeping item behind me on the table, in addition to some water, is a sign-up sheet. So anyone that would like to sign up and speak after the presentation is encouraged to do so. With that, let me turn the program over to our Executive Director, Susan Beyer.
Thank you, President Eisbart, and welcome everyone. We didn't intentionally plan on this very special meeting to be held during National Library Week, but it was a very fortunate coincidence. The theme for National Library Week for 2022 is Connect with Your Library, and it emphasizes that libraries are places to get connected to books, connected to technology, connected with programs, with media, and ideas. But most importantly, libraries connect people to one another. And along with our incredible staff, library facilities make these connections possible. When we shared our initial options and recommendations in January, we asked for the community's feedback regarding the path forward for our library buildings. We asked, and the community definitely delivered. And I want to thank the community for your generosity of thought and of time. We had over 1,300 completed surveys, 5 open houses with 108 in attendance. Thank you so much for caring about ACPL and its future, and please know that the conversation was heard and it will continue. The feedback you provided is the foundation for a roadmap for the future, a roadmap for equitable and accessible library service for all of Allen County, delivered in a fiscally sound manner. As we enter into the next steps of the process, there will be additional opportunities for our staff and patrons to share their thoughts. I also want to thank our ACPL Board of Trustees with a special acknowledgement to our Capital Projects Committee Chair Marty Seifert, Ben Eisbart, and Kent Castleman as our Capital Projects Committee members. It's important to remember that all of our trustees are volunteers serving their community. They give many, many hours of their time, truly out of love for their community and their library, and we are thankful. Our ACPL staff has been incredibly generous with their time, their observations, and their feedback. They know their libraries and they know their communities, and they are true advocates for their patrons. I want to thank all of our staff for hosting open houses, for speaking to community groups, and for encouraging their patrons, friends, and neighbors to complete surveys. This process has truly been a collaborative effort among all of our staff, but I do want to acknowledge a few key people. Chief of Public Service Operations Kim Boland has been the staff lead on this process, and her years of experience with facility management and building projects have been invaluable. I want to thank our Chief Financial Officer Dave Sedestrom for his guidance and prudence on all things financial. I want to thank Maintenance Manager Jake Olam for providing our consultants with his expertise on how our buildings operate. And I also want to thank Director of Communications Stephanie Smith. Throughout this process, our aim was transparency, engagement from staff and patrons, and clarity in communication. I believe we have succeeded in that, and we are committed to continue. Finally, let me thank and introduce our consultants, Rick Ortmeyer from Boswick Design Partnership and library consultant June Garcia. They have become an important part of our extended library family this past year, and I am so excited for all of you to hear what they have to share this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you, Board. So Today we're going to talk a little bit about the process, and echoing Susan's comments about transparency. This is going to be a little bit of a refresher for some who've been through this a process discussion before, but for the record, we want to reinforce the level of transparency that was important to the board. So we're going to talk about the purpose, process. We're going to talk a little bit about how we documented current conditions. We will talk about the process that led us to the public comment draft and the community outreach. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what all that means moving forward, what we heard, how it should shape the facilities, and then the specific recommendations for each location. We'll also say that this is a summary of the full report, which is available or will be soon available online as a PDF in all of its detail. So you're seeing a brief summary of a lot of work, many of whom the director just mentioned were instrumental in making that happen. So first, again, my name is Rick Ortmeyer. I'm an architect, partner with Bostwick Design Partnership, based in Cleveland, Ohio, with gratefully many years of learning from librarians around the country, including my partner in crime here, June.
June Garcia, library consultant, currently based in Denver, Colorado. Previously, the director of the San Antonio Public Library, and 20 plus years as a library consultant, and delighted to be here today.
Another key member that is noted here is Carson Block, technology expert, but technology expert specific to public libraries. And many of you have continued to communicate with him about the future of technology in this library system. Two people I do want to acknowledge, in addition to this, who were key members of the team. There was an architect from Lafayette, Indiana, Harry Moeller from Moeller Associates, who supported our facility assessments. And our cost estimator based in Cleveland but works nationally, Brandon Lawler with the firm And Estimate. So starting with a brief overview of purpose, these are excerpts from the request for public proposals. And the purpose of this was to chart the path for facilities in Allen County Public Library for the next 10 years. But I would say that overarching was the purpose of engaging the staff and the residents of Allen County transparently to inform all of the recommendations that you'll see this evening. A couple of examples of the purpose June will talk about.
One of the things that we've known is that, libraries have always been, and I believe, at least for my lifetime and probably almost all of yours, will be about books in whatever format they are. But over the past 10, 20 plus years, there have been a lot of other trends and things nationally and internationally that have impacted the way library service is delivered and will be delivered in the future. So we did look at those, and we're mindful of those as we met with staff and as we met with the public. So everything from connected learning and AI and privacy and things such as that, and how our spaces can and should perhaps change in the future to deliver the types of services that your community needs and wants today and tomorrow.
So what libraries are doing in the community is one of the big factors to have a facilities plan moving forward. Another factor specific to the county is population growth. Allen County is unique in the Midwest, certainly unique in the larger extended Great Lakes states, of having consistent growth. And that's something to be very proud of. But that growth has created pressures on your library system over time that need to be addressed. The third overarching factor in the purpose of doing a master plan now is the age of the facilities. What this chart shows is that the origins of some of your buildings go back to the late 60s, early 70s. In 1990, there was a building boom of 3 branches, and then the large capital improvement project in the early to mid 2000s, which completely recreated the system, and it demonstrates where we are today and what the system looks like today. But as we look ahead to the next 10 years, by 2030, all of those facilities will be 25 years old. So the age and the existing condition of facilities was a third factor in looking at the facilities as they are today. So the process was outlined, started just short of a year ago, and we're going to walk through how we maintained that commitment to transparency while we gathered feedback from the staff, gained insights from the community, prepared some options for review, and then received those recommendations, the feedback that shaped the recommendations you'll see today. So the first thing we did was facility tours. Last May, we were able to be on site, see all of the facilities, led by the library branch managers in most cases and library staff, see firsthand, hear firsthand the challenges, the opportunities, the good, and the challenging, the things that were helpful in the buildings and the things that they know were not aligned with the community needs. We also surveyed the staff, and nearly 150 responses that ranged from every branch was represented and every department of Maine was represented. So we really were dedicated to hearing the full spectrum of staff input back in May of 2021. And we're grateful for the time that they took to give us that feedback. We also engaged them in workshops around visioning for the future of the public libraries in Allen County, what they might look like. This was over several days, four facilitated workshops to dream about the kinds of spaces that would better serve the needs of the residents and the things that the residents are already asking for. Our colleague Carson led the library through a series of workshops on how the increasingly encompassing world of technology impacts in a positive way the role of libraries moving forward, and specific to how technology can be leveraged moving forward in Allen County. So that was through May through the summertime of 2021, a lot of deep engagement with staff focus to get that feedback and that brainpower from the staff. June's going to talk a little bit about the community feedback.
Only if you give me the clicker. So, back one. Okay. So one of the things that we did was we held a series of focus groups, as you can see, with community partners, elected officials, the Spanish-speaking community, homeschool community, multicultural organizations, and we asked each of these groups somewhat similar questions. What did they see, or what had they heard about the strengths of the library? What services was the library offering now that they thought were really important and definitely should be continued or expanded? What perhaps was the library not doing that they wished that you would? What type of spaces and facilities were useful in their libraries, and what would they like to see added? Were there any barriers to service? And although the questions and the responses were a little bit different from group to group, depending on their perspectives and their, the audience, the input we received from them was very, very valuable and definitely is reflected in this report. We held similar community conversations to those that Rick mentioned with the staff. Did I click forward too far?
You did.
Oh, this her. Okay. We showed, these were informal. We showed images of libraries around the world, not as examples of what you should do, but as examples of what other libraries had done. We deliberately selected images where if you liked image A and C and Q, you might not like D and F because they were very different. So we had that conversation around what did they like, what did they think should be included, and what was important for us to know about your existing buildings and what they would like to see in your buildings going forward. And got very good press, thank you, about the sessions. And the people who came really enjoyed them. It gave us, staff and Rick and I, a chance to chat informally with people. These were not structured presentations where we stood up and gave a speech. Instead, we asked them to talk to us about the images, what they saw, and what they would like to see. Also did two other types of activities. I mentioned the community conversation. Susan did one with teens. Susan, do you want to comment about that at all?
It was probably the most fun I had all year. I hung out with teens for about 2 hours talking about their dream library. And I think there's a common thought out there that teens are all about technology, and they are. That was a priority. But also, they still love books. They want a place where they can enjoy both simultaneously.
Right. Susan got a chance to go back to her children's librarian roots, and so I just wanted to give her a chance to say that. And so, but there was also an activity held in a number of branches during the summer learning program in which children were asked to either draw pictures of their ideal library, or to take some of the images that we collected and create collages or whatever. And in the report, we've included some, but we've shown you two here. The children's ideas are just absolutely adorable, and we certainly enjoy doing that. We also, you'll see throughout the report, where we've included quotes from staff and from community residents in the surveys or other things to illustrate the points that were made. So, and we did the first of the set of surveys. This was done before any recommendations were made. So questions were asked, such as, how often do you go to the library? Which library do you visit? How often do you go? We asked them what they liked best. We just have to point out that bright blue line. The thing that got the most positive response was the helpful and friendly staff. And then coming in with a very close, almost tie for second, location and books. Again, not a surprise, but it was wonderful to hear the community say that. We also asked, what would they like us to consider for spaces in the future or even to enhance now? Interestingly enough, outdoor spaces was something they wanted to see. Most of your buildings are on fairly small lots. The building and the parking takes up most of the space. And they indicated that having a space for outdoor programs or outdoor activities would be something that they hoped you would consider in the future. We asked them anything else that they wanted to share. Again, they pointed out the importance of books, a theme that you will note runs throughout their comments and our report. And we asked them how likely were they to support new facilities or expansions in the future. And the combination of very likely and likely totaled just over 70%. So, Rick?
Thanks, Jan. So having gathered a lot of feedback and on going through that, we were assessing and getting information about the condition of the existing buildings. And this was a combination of our own observations, but also comments we heard from the public. In particular, staff who live in these buildings were instrumental. What I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides are actually assessments that are included in the final report in detail. The report that the public saw in January had a one-page snapshot summary, and some of that information is visible here. But just as an example, we're going to show you two branches, one Georgetown and then Shawnee. So just to explain this a bit, overarching, we had 4 questions that we wanted to be answered about the site. Is it adequate today for the current demand? Yes or no? And in Georgetown case, no. What's the overall condition of the building? Georgetown was one of those buildings built in the mid-2000s, still in good condition. But the site is very tight. You'll see a map of the site in a moment. And as currently configured, it wouldn't allow for any meaningful expansion. And would a renovation or expansion on this site allow to achieve the 10-year service demand that we can anticipate with usage patterns, population growth, et cetera? So that snapshot exists for all branches and was a helpful, simple tool to understand how the site can help achieve the goals that we were hearing from the community and what they wanted. On this cover page, we also just have a map. I want to thank Kurt and his team for providing narratives that help give the background of each branch a little bit of life so that there's some history and some context to the area and how the branch came to be. And then some data about how the branch performs. So this is consistent as a home page for each of the branches in the full report. The next page, we talk about the site, and that is site observations, things like visibility, things like how the parking works, things that demonstrate the capacity of the site to allow for expansion, the building footprint related to the site boundary. And some observations, some narrative observations about how effectively that is achieving the goals of the library today. The balance of the assessments talk about different aspects of the library. So one is branch condition, and this is where Jake was instrumental from the library in helping us understand this condition of the systems and any reports about problems and issues they've had. So we have narratives about the condition, and we also have some representative pictures, but again, consistent with that idea of transparency and listening to your community and your staff, we've included relevant quotes from the public survey in July, the public survey from January, and the staff survey from last summer that help illuminate the idea of how these buildings are working. And those are infused throughout the document, front to back. We also created a map of how each branch is being used today. And we mapped out the public service areas, those areas that are used for collaboration, the areas that are used for staff only, and areas that are building support, things like mechanical spaces, electrical rooms. And then the last space are things that are public areas, but they aren't really public service delivery. So those are restrooms and public vestibules and things like that. So it gave us a way to analyze the building itself, but also share graphs of how these buildings distribute space relative to each other. So there's a space allocation graph in the full report that shows how the buildings do against each other. And there's narratives about how the building functions. And that function is really from the perspective of the patron. How does the building work for patrons and what we're hearing from them and from staff? And then observations about efficiency, which are really coming from staff. How does the building help them operate the building as a library? And then the last pages on each branch summary talk about technology. And our consultant Carson worked with staff to get summaries on things such as Wi-Fi, power outlets, how the computer use actually functions today, the space use for computers, and then ambiance. And ambiance is something that's harder to measure, but everyone feels it when they go in. So it's an important aspect, especially when we think back to the age chart. You know, many of these buildings still have original finishes from when they were built or renovated in the early 2000s, some going back to the 90s. Some have had partial updates, so there's kind of a mix. But it's these things such as lighting, how buildings wear, what the carpet is, the shape of the carpet, that do matter to people. And we heard comments from the public and comments from staff about that factor. And as we think about what we imagine in the libraries moving forward, how they feel and how they function is a big part of how successful they may be seen in your community. So as another representative example, this is Shawnee with a similar snapshot of how this site achieves the goals of the community in that particular community, but in the intents of the library service delivery overall. This particular site, this wooded site, and how the building sits and the parking sits in this site adjacent to the schools that are in the neighborhoods nearby. In this particular case, again, pulling quotes from those who use Shawnee, in addition to the staff who work in Shawnee, was instrumental in helping us outline the condition of Shawnee relative to the future recommendations. In this map, uniquely, Shawnee has a service desk, a circulation desk that is in the middle of the building as opposed to backed up to staff space. So this map represents that as staff space surrounded by the public service space. And last, again, technology and ambiance specific to each branch. So in the full report, which you'll see online, each branch has that set of observations by category, including the site map and the building map itself and how they use space today. So those current conditions were important when we started talking about future recommendations. And when we prepared with the board's guidance options for recommendations that were delivered to the board in January and shared with the public in January. And reiterate that that was a 30-page document that outlined high-level summaries for each location, and it outlined 2 possible options for how the branch system might look moving forward. And the purpose of this document was to gain feedback from the residents in the communities that these libraries serve to help shape what is the final recommendation from the consultant standpoint being delivered in this document. And it included potential costs, and it included, again, 2 options. Some branches had variations on how we might satisfy that community. And then the library did an extensive outreach through the months of January and February. Susan, you touched on it earlier today. 5 open houses and I think over 100 participants in those open houses. There was a presentation, much like this one on January 5th. There was a virtual live stream on January 10th where people who couldn't be in a public meeting could tune in and ask questions directly. And then there was a public survey. And this public survey achieved over 1,300 responses. And I think, Susan, you summed it up nicely with diverse community equals diverse thoughts. And I think your March 9th presentation on the results of that survey was a great summary of the various input that we received that shaped the recommendations that we have. So we're going to talk about recommendations in a minute, and June is going to talk about the kinds of things that we want to see in the future libraries.
Part of the conversations that we had both with staff and with the communities was what might these renovated facilities look like, and what might new facilities, how might they be different, and what do we need to capture. So this was our goal together: build upon a foundation of welcoming and engaging places for all ages, where lifelong learning, discovery, and personal service thrive and create an even more patron-friendly environment at all locations. So what did we hear? Well, we summarized this in a number of bullets, and I am going to take time to sort of summarize them for you. We certainly heard that we needed to have spaces that could showcase the books so that people could find what they were looking for, find it easily, and that they could browse, and that things were in logical order and the collections were visible to them. We wanted those buildings to be flexible. Rick mentioned that we toured. Well, when we toured, we were still pretty much at the height of COVID, so your meeting rooms were full of tables and chairs that had been removed from the public service spaces, and there wasn't a lot they could do to rearrange the buildings except to take things out. So how do we design spaces going forward that are flexible? Heaven forbid you should ever need to redo your buildings for COVID, but as needs change, as communities change, or as opportunities change on a daily or monthly basis, that your facilities can be adjusted a little to make those differences. We heard from almost every group, and we certainly heard from the focus groups, that spaces for meetings, whether they be large meetings, whether they be small, 6 to 8 people, whether they be an opportunity for tutoring, whether it be an opportunity for someone to meet with a social worker, we needed spaces for meetings so that they could be held in comfort with a high degree of technology that might be useful, and for some degree of privacy so that what's happening in the room, even if it's a public meeting like this, isn't disturbing the people who are using the building for other purposes, whether it to be to study or to browse. We also heard that having spaces for children and youth, especially that were colorful, playful, fun, welcoming, and inviting, having spaces for technology. Almost every survey we did, we heard many people say, more electrical plugs, more plugs to plug in safely our technology. All you have to do is look over at the tech over here on the side. It's like, my word, all that power they need and all those cords. So how do we do that going forward? Spaces to support STEAM and STEM learning. They wanted beautiful outdoor spaces where they could sit, read, wait for a ride, or just enjoy the good weather. Perhaps not on a day like today, but on other days. Programming, spaces for programming so that more than one thing could happen at a time. The branch libraries have a meeting room, but often there is demands for multiple meetings and the staff just don't have the space to hold them. And then things for welcoming for people of all ages, all demographics, all abilities. So that's sort of what we heard in words. So what might this look like a little in actual practice? Your board chair, Ben, has frequently said, well, where's the sizzle? Where's the sizzle in these new buildings? And so what did we hear? So in terms of spaces for children and teens, what we heard from both the public and the staff was to have spaces for kids, but to a certain extent to zone them. The preschool children don't want to be next to the teens, and the teens sure don't want to be next to the preschool kids. So how can we make them flexible so that things can be moved around and put on casters? Different tables and chairs of different heights. Certainly what what a 3-year-old might want to sit on. Rick's got a young daughter. Might not be exactly what her grandma wants to sit on when she goes to the library. So how do we accommodate, baby bear and grandpa bear on different types of tables and chairs? And how can staff see through this space so that they can make sure that they're able and they can help people, they can find things when someone needs their assistance, and don't have tall shelves sticking up blocking their view. And as we think about new buildings, well, self-check machines so that those who choose to check out their own materials can do so. Computers with age-appropriate content. We heard from a lot of parents who really would like you to put family restrooms in the children's area so that there's changing spaces and they can take a child quickly to the restroom when that's necessary. If you've ever been in the library at the time of a children's story time and you have all those strollers, where do they go? So maybe a stroller parking area. And then a special space zoned, perhaps even with walled-in space, but at least a little bit of sound buffering for the teens so that they can do their collaborative work. They can feel comfortable in the library. They're not disturbed by, nor are they disturbing others. In terms of adults, again, places for quiet. If you just want to sit and read a newspaper, or other places, perhaps a little bit more active. Signage, so you can find what you need and want, but not signage that's so permanent that it's hanging from the ceiling that when you move things around, the signage is all wrong again. I don't know about you, but that's really annoying when they do that in a grocery store. It tells you that mushrooms are on aisle 8 and they're really on aisle 12. So how can we change our signage quickly and easily? And the things are sort of logically oriented or arranged. Power everywhere. Lots of different types of chairs, different types of seating, whether it be an ergonomic chair at a computer, a comfortable lounge chair by a window, and robust Wi-Fi. We've also heard suggestions that in the bigger, perhaps newer libraries, you could have a dedicated quiet room where people who did just want to go in and study or work could do so. No cell phone talking, no talking with people, just quiet, and everything convenient. Well, not everything, but those things that can be moved, easy to move. Meeting rooms. Have the big ones close to the front door in the branches, close with restrooms, storage, and small meeting rooms, as I mentioned before, of different sizes. Perhaps a special room for children's story time, what we used to call the glitter and glue floor, so you can clean it up easily. And maybe even some maker spaces in some branches, we don't know. And then technology in all the meeting room spaces so they can be used by the public and the community. And last but not least, next to last, tech. Technology everywhere, whether it be for printing, whether it be for copying, whether it be in the conference rooms, whether it be for your checkout, just a robust infrastructure to support technology, as well as what might happen in the future. And then signage to the extent that it makes sense and possible. And perhaps even this last bullet, installing book lockers so that patrons can pick up items when the library is closed. And then we also heard about outdoor spaces. There was a lot of support, when possible, to have drive-up or drive-through windows, either where someone could drop off their materials when they're bringing them back as opposed to getting out of the car and going inside, or perhaps even a drive-up window that could be used to pick up a hold or to do some other sort of transaction. The idea of, as I mentioned earlier, outdoor spaces where programming could be held, well-lit, beautiful surroundings, as well as spaces for bike racks and things such as that for those who've come by bike, and well-lit in case people are walking in the neighborhood to come to the branch. So, Rick?
Thanks, June. So now we're going to talk about how all this leads to recommendations, and thank you for your patience and attention. We felt it was important to reiterate the level of investment of time and the level of engagement that led to the recommendations that you're all about to see. So this is the Allen County Public Library system as it exists today, which is a legacy of the prior developments over time that we mapped out. The current recommendation documented in this plan is, I think some of you have the recommendation handed out. We're going to talk about this a little bit, and this is reminiscent of what was presented in January with some key differences. And I'll just reiterate that the key differences that you're going to hear about are a direct link to the input that was received. So that input mattered. That participation really did matter. So we thank everyone for their participation in that. So just a quick explanation of the map. In the lower left-hand corner, there's a key. So the circle that's blank in the middle just represents locations that are recommended to be vacated and replaced by different branches. The solid circle is a branch that will receive a full renovation, but does not need to expand. The solid circle with a blue circle around it is an existing building that will receive a full renovation and is recommended to receive an expansion. And then the green oval represents the location or approximate location for recommended new branches to replace existing branches, or in some cases to be new branches added to the system. So in the summary, we have a total of 15 locations recommended. I'm going to start with the recommended renovations first. So Little Turtle in Tecumseh, just north of downtown. They serve these neighborhoods well. The square footage is not necessarily a concern given the current demands, but they do need to be reconfigured to achieve some of those imagine your future library spaces that June was just talking about. Just southeast of downtown is Pontiac Branch. Similarly, the square footage is adequate for the demand that it's receiving, but it does need a full recommendation and some assistance, in particular things like the distance from parking to the front door, if there's ways we can improve the landscaping to help with those kinds of issues. Moving to the southeast portion, in this plan we recommend a full, complete renovation of Hessen Castle, but that Hessen Castle would stay in its current location. The building needs a lot of attention, including some masonry repairs. I think the access to meeting rooms in particular, some of the ADA issues that are legacy issues since the building was built prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act, just need improvements and to make this building serve that community in an effective way. The other two branches on the list that are intended for renovations are in eastern Allen County, Woodburn, and sort of central east. Again, this is a building that, unlike most of your other branches, has a lot of outdoor space that may be benefit from programming opportunities. And the interior space is adequate size-wise, but can use some refreshments and updates to systems. And down in southeast Allen is Monroeville, again, a small but mighty branch, doing wonderful things for the community, needing some updates for systems and some freshening of spaces and some configurations, but otherwise adequately sized. I'm going to talk about the two branches whose primary option are expansion. In the northeast Allen is Grable. And I think all of you are aware the rapid expansion of population in the whole northern tier, and Grable is experiencing that growth. It's the existing building is not able to handle the current demand. So the site is again unique in that it allows for expansion, and we're recommending that Grable expand to be 12,000 square feet, which is about a 4,000 to 5,000 square foot expansion over its current size. And Waynedale, which needs a targeted expansion of roughly 2,500 square feet. And the concern with Waynedale is really that the meeting room is inadequate and the staff spaces are inadequate. The public space, with some targeted renovations, can be improved to achieve those Imagine Your Future Library goals. But physically, the existing meeting rooms and staff spaces are inadequate and would need some attention. I'm going to move to Georgetown now, because Georgetown actually is the only branch that we're considering with an option. What we heard loud and clear from the community is that we don't want Georgetown to move. So the first goal would be to expand Georgetown so that it can adequately handle the demand that it's currently experiencing particularly after school hours when the students come and fill the branch at 3 o'clock during school year. The ideal solution would be to find a way to acquire property so the building could expand in place to approximately 25,000 square feet, which would be just a little under 10,000 square feet beyond its current size, about 6,000 square feet addition. If that proves to be infeasible, then we would recommend that Georgetown still grow to 25,000 square feet to handle that demand, but do that in a new space as close to the existing location as possible, to not lose that thread from the community, not lose that connectivity to the schools, whether that's on a new site or whether that's in a renovated retail site that might be available in the area. We'll talk about the new branches, and I'll start in the northern tier. We recognize, again, the growth in the north part of the county has put some significant pressure on the branches that serve that area, particularly DuPont and Grable. So we're recommending a new branch, which would start out at approximately 15,000 square feet, but occupy a site in the Huntertown area that would be capable of expanding in the future as that population is anticipated to continue to grow. DuPont is another branch that is currently not capable of meeting the demands that it's experiencing today, and the site does not allow for expansion. So we're recommending that the DuPont branch is replaced with a new approximately 25,000 square foot branch in the same region, in the same neighborhood, but for some distribution of the branches across your communities. With a new branch in Huntertown, there's an opportunity to put a new branch a little farther south than the current DuPont branch, which fills a gap in your current system between Little Turtle and Tecumseh and the current DuPont branch. So there's a little bit more even distribution for the current population. Moving to Southwest Allen, the Aboit branch is another building. I think it's the oldest building without any major capital improvements in your current system, built in 1990. There are some concerns about the condition of that building. The site does not allow for the expansion, and experiencing similar population growth, we're recommending to find a new site in Aboit for a 25,000 square foot new building in an area close to, but achieving the kind of goals that Imagine Your Library allows in the Aboit area. And then in Shawnee, we do recommend the existing building has a lot of structural challenges. The fact that it's built into the ground and below grade really prevents its expansion. It has a lot of legacy systems that are aging out. It has leak problems that expansion wouldn't necessarily be able to accommodate. So we're recommending selling that property and building a new Shawnee branch of approximately 20,000 square feet as close to the existing site as possible. Again, similar to what we heard in Georgetown, we heard in Loud and Clear, we don't want to lose the connectivity to that neighborhood. We want to keep it walkable. We want to keep it close to the schools. So that's our recommendation for Shawnee. The main library, we've been working with staff. There's an allowance built into the budget for some targeted renovations to improve things like wayfinding, some environmental things like acoustics in the Great Hall. We'd love to talk about how to add some more collaboration space in meeting rooms. So these meeting rooms are well loved and well used, but there's not medium-sized or small collaboration spaces in Maine, and there's a real demand for that. And there's an opportunity to create some of those with a targeted renovation of Maine. So all of that, as noted here, for a 15-branch system, which adds a total of about 54,000 new square feet of space to the system, would it be a cost range of about 112 to 118 million to achieve that, and that's construction cost. And the options here are really around Georgetown, so that either means 4 new branches, 2 renovations and expansions, and 9 renovations, or if Georgetown becomes a new location, that would be 5 new branches, 2 renovations and expansions with Waynedale, and then the renovations as noted. So just a note about what the costs include. The costs do not yet include the purchase or sale of property, but they do include all of the estimated hard costs, which are things that contractors build, the structural systems, concrete, roofs, walls, and interior finishes. And they also include what is known in the industry as soft costs. And those are things that include things like the books, furniture, equipment that is movable within the branch, but also the professional services, surveys, architects' fees, engineers' fees, and associated fees to make these buildings happen. And then there's also been some assumptions about escalation, as we know that we can't do all these buildings at once. We've made some assumptions about how a building program like this might play out over time. We've estimated with similar systems, a branch reconfiguration like this can be done in 3 phases, perhaps focusing on the new buildings first. Where buildings are being replaced, we would not need to vacate the existing buildings until new branches are built, so that there would be no loss of service. But we do know that it would take approximately 7 to 8 years to accommodate a 3-phase program like that. So that's our recommendations for the physical buildings. We do want to touch briefly on the other ways that libraries can provide service to their communities outside of physical facilities, which is something that's already being done but can also be done moving forward.
We just, identified a few things that other libraries are doing. They are listed in alphabetical order, I hope. So things like book bikes that you see here in the lower left corner, that's actually also a Wi-Fi hotspot that goes out to shopping centers. This happens to be the convention center in Denver, and has books. They issue library cards. They make people aware. They do pop-up programming. Book lockers. It looks probably very familiar to like the Amazon book lockers and pickup lockers that are around neighborhoods. Some libraries are putting these in lobbies, and some are putting them outside, either at libraries or at other locations. When they're at non-library locations, you have the challenge of staff needing to take materials from there and pick them up and how that works, but being very effectively used in some places. And again, we'll stick with the photos for a moment. In the lower right corner, is actually a book vending machine, which are some library systems are experimenting with. They are quite wonderful. They do need constant restocking. They're not inexpensive, but they serve a need that this is for a solution for some communities. We're not recommending these, that you pick all of these or even some of these or any of these. We're just saying that these are some opportunities or ideas for you to consider. Classes with program partners where you go to someone else's site, whether it be a daycare or a nursing home, or you go to any place where people are gathering and do a program with them. Homebound delivery, that's the van in the upper right-hand corner. Happens to be Portland's van, where they take things to nursing homes or other types of places. Boosted events, outreach vans, the same type of thing, going to parks, pop-up libraries, pop-up programming. Techmobiles, which are focused with technology equipment, in some cases where customers or patrons can actually go onto the vehicle and use the equipment. In other cases, they go and just do demos, or they show people how to use equipment. And then, of course, virtual programming, which your library transitioned to so well during the pandemic, but ways of providing service that aren't in your building. And last but not least, some libraries are starting to consider self-service options for when the library is closed. In some cases, it's allowing people into the building itself during restricted hours. Their card becomes sort of like almost like an ATM card. It allows them in, you know who's in there. And in other cases, that's the only way the library is accessed. It's never staffed. It's being experimented with. It's mainly in Europe, but there are some US locations trying it. I don't know where I stand on that one yet, but we just thought we'd mention it, that the technology is there. Whether or not it's the right solution is another story. But we don't want you to think that the only way to deliver service is from your buildings. And of course, your staff aren't only delivering service that way now. So Rick, back to you.
So That concludes our presentation. We really want to echo Susan's acknowledgments. First and foremost, the Allen County residents. We did read every comment in the surveys, and it was diverse voices, but it mattered. And I think our recommendations, working with the board and working particularly with the Capital Projects Committee, we appreciate that input because that engagement really does shape the future of this library system. So thank you all for that. And we also want to thank the board and particularly the Capital Projects Committee, Marty and Ben and Kent for all their time, and the library leadership. And again, Susan singling out, Kim Boland was our primary contact for this. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but she was instrumental in making this happen. And then all the library staff who took time to really help shape this document and provide us information and, more importantly, insights and a vision for what the library will be in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, June. Gives us a lot to think about, and let's hold the board questions until we hear from Susan and David, and then our committee chair.
Sure. I will toss it to Dave to start us off.
All right. I know Susan and I wanted to talk about the two topics of financial aspects, and those are, of course, given the plan size and the amounts that we're talking about, it will be necessary for us to seek financing to pay for these expansion renovations. That will take in the form of either a GO or first mortgage bond, or both could be. Right now, with this plan being finalized, our financial advisors, Baker and Tilly, are working on those projections for the impact to tax rates, the amount on financing that will be necessary, et cetera. And those will be coming out in the next few weeks. At this point, there's also important to point out that because, as I've mentioned before, your diligence in being very cost effective and containing costs here, we've been able to, over the number of years, accumulate almost $21.5 million of reserves that we have designated for this capital expansion. So we have those funds available that will be used to offset the necessary financing through bonding. And I think that's an admirable item because it does give us flexibility when it comes to deciding the final outcome. Another quick note is that, as you may know, the bonds that were used to expand in 2001 through 2005, the final payments were made on those in December of 2021. So at this point, the library is debt-free. There is no tax burden on any of the taxpayers of Fort Wayne or Allen County for any debt service. So we, any of these new debt items would be not adding on to any existing debt, but would be totally new debt. One thing I think we should talk about real quickly is operational costs, because the last time we talked about this was a different plan, and as obviously from this plan, it is calling for an expansion from 14 to 15 locations, and that will have impact on our operational costs. During this whole plan and development, Kim Boland and I have been working closely on monitoring these, coming up with different scenarios, and we really feel that any of the expansion, any of the renovations, new branches, the operational costs are going to be manageable within our current cost constraints and our current revenue growth. And there's a few reasons for that. First is what I just mentioned. We have been containing costs and putting those savings into a capital expansion reserve fund. Those will now free up and be available for operating costs. We currently spend around $2 million a year on capital items, and so while those are not going to totally go away, they will be having some available for the operational cost. Second, as Rick had mentioned, while we are going up in 54,000 square feet, if these plans go into effect, that doesn't have a linear relationship as to things like staffing. If obviously you've been in our branches, you know that they are not laid out in the most efficient and effective way. These new plans will be put into place with better sight lines, better access. We will be able to have the staff manage them better. So just because a branch is expanding in square footage does not necessarily mean it will need new staff. And so Kim has been working diligently on that area, and that's the second reason we wouldn't need to be as concerned about the increase in operating costs. Third item is obviously, as Rick has pointed out, many of our buildings are in terrible condition from an infrastructure standpoint. As I just mentioned, we spend $2 million a year on capital items, and mostly it's spent on things like HVAC repairs, replacements, et cetera. With these new systems and more efficient systems, especially in things like lighting, which would, moving it from a fluorescent to a LED type lighting, will cut down on the utility costs and offset the operating costs. We feel that we're going to be able to see significant savings that way. And finally, the last thing that June mentioned, it's our intention to implement as much technology as possible to help mitigate any service staffing increase for service delivery. Things like book lockers or automated retrieval systems, things like that. This is no different than in the 2001, 2005 expansion when the new thing then was self-check machines. Now, they're part of our operation, but back then it was a new technology, and it allowed us to stem a lot of the circulation staffing that might have been needed for those kind of activities. So my typical short but long-winded answer, operational costs we still feel are very manageable with this expansion, even though we would be going up an increase of one branch. So those are the two items I really wanted to talk about today, and Susan, I'll put it back to you then.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. I wanted to share some important next steps that are coming up soon in this month. So there will be 2 preliminary determination public hearings right here in this room. One is on April 21st, 2 weeks from today, and the second is on April 28th, and both are at 3 p.m. The public can attend in person, or they can also watch a live stream on YouTube. Our bond consultants will give a presentation on the project financials at these public hearings. There will also be an opportunity for the public to offer their comments about the project. At the conclusion of the second hearing on April 28th, the board will consider adopting a preliminary determination resolution that will declare a need for the project and the issuance of bonds. And they will also approve the form of a local public question for the project to appear on the ballot if a referendum is requested. And also, all the information in our consultants' reports, the complete facility master report, and the individual branch summaries will be posted by tomorrow morning on our facility master plan website, and that is youracpl.org. Again, that is youracpl.org. Check tomorrow morning, and all of this will be available.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Marty?
All right, thank you, Ben. Again, I may repeat some of what we said, but I think it's important. We try to get this information out and make sure everybody kind of understands where we are. First, I do want to say welcome to our visitors, welcome to everybody online, and all those who watch it in the future as well as they try to understand this visionary project. I'm hoping that we can start and get off the ground here for our library. This really started, I think, when this board recognized that we have a growing need to meet the diverse needs of our community in this library, and our library, as Rick said and Susan, others have said, we have a great problem. Our county is growing. It is wonderful. Our population is growing, and we're doing well. But that has put demands on our library. And despite the COVID pandemic and those issues, I think we all believe and understand it's going to continue as our community grows as well. So that's why we started this process in the first place. Rick and June have been instrumental in working with us to go through and presenting this plan and giving us their expertise. It started before we hired them. We went out and we asked for proposals from around really a national search for people to help us with this, to do the facilities master plan. And we got proposals from all over the country. I think we either had 12 or 16, I can't remember. I read them all. Then we narrowed it down to 4 for interviews, and we finally hired Rick and June and Carson Block to help us walk through this process. So it's been ongoing for a long time now to get to this more public stage as we present all this. The library, during this whole process, I think it's been clear, have wanted engagement. We wanted ideas. We wanted to talk to everyone. Because I think Susan said the theme here for National Library Week is connect with your library. And it is your library. And that is our whole point here. And when as we go through this is we want to make sure this, then everyone recognizes it's their library and we can do the best we can for everyone in this community. I think we've listened since the January presentation. I know Susan has said she's read them all. I read them all the survey responses. Many members of the board attended the open houses. I was able to attend all of them and listen to what everybody had to say. And it made a difference. I think there's substantial changes to the plan. As we've gone forward, as we worked with Rick and June to do this, obviously one of the big ticket items here, Shawnee Branch, we believe should remain open, still larger than it currently is, and stay in that area. We certainly have heard I've had many people come up to me with ideas for the new spot, and we'll get to that kind of what the future holds and how we go forward with that process here in a bit. But that was a significant change, and really it was because we heard from people. Same with Georgetown. If we can expand it on site, that is our goal. If we can't, our goal is to have a major expansion of the size as close as possible. And obviously the branch in the Huntertown area is one of the things I think most people agree needs to happen. And it is a little bit larger now, and hopefully we're going to be finding a site that allows for that future growth that a future board may decide is necessary as we move forward. I did want to address one thing, and that is how specific can we be right now? And there has been questions of that. Where's it exactly the new branch is going to be? And the real answer is that kind of goes against what we were trying to do here, which is be transparent and hear from everybody. We didn't want to go out and tell you what our plan is and tell you here's the spot, here's the plans, and we already bought the land, because we really wanted to hear from our communities. So in some ways that just wasn't possible. Also, frankly, it would cost a lot of money to do all that as we go through this process. And this is, as I think Rick pointed out and June pointed out, this is a long-term project. We have different phases we'll be going through, and other people will talk about this as well, but we're going to be open to the community during the entire time, whether this board will be listening and seeking input, needing input from our community as we go forward with this. I think Susan talked about the future goals here as well, so I won't go over all that. We do have to, assuming the board passes this and we go forward with everything, that's when we're going to need to come up with our parameters, our factors to consider for site acquisition plans. We've all talked about them in the open houses, especially proximity to schools, bus access, proximity to trails, sidewalks, adequate parking, possible future expansion on any new location. These are all things that I think are very important for site acquisition for any of these sites as we move forward. The board will also need to develop construction standards, engage realtors, architects, talk about interior spaces. And again, all with community input. You've heard Dave talk about, we definitely want to make it as efficient as possible, but we want to hear from the community as well so that we have the right space for everyone. It is going to be a 7 to 8 year plan in 3 phases. I think most people may say it makes sense to start building some of the new branches, get those done and move over. But we're going to basically have experts and consultants help us determine what is the best way forward here, and certainly rely on our staff as well at the library because they know our libraries best. So really just a personal note here. I've said this before to people. I'm here because I'm a bookworm. I love this library. I got over 40 things checked out right now, and I'm here way too much. And I have been ever since I moved to this town in 1992. If you had told me 30 years later I'd be on this board and be hoping to help lead an expansion, I frankly would have surprised me very, very much back then. But I'm really, really happy to do that, and hopefully we can all do this investment in our community. With that, I will pass it on to my fellow members, Ben and Ken, who have spent a lot of hours with me on this project, to give their remarks as well.
Thank you. As I think about, I've said this several times, but we've got an immense opportunity in front of us as well, but also an immense responsibility as I talk to my fellow board members here on that end of it. And we've definitely heard loud and clear from the community what they like and what they don't like, from those things. And of course, we want to address what we can. I wish we could say we could address everything, but we all know that that's just not possible. But I do feel like the recommendation that came forward, and of course the committee worked with the consultants on this, so we've been pouring into the response that you're seeing today as well, and that we really feel like with the expansion of Allen County and the work that's being done, it's just not possible for us to stay in a 14-branch model and continue to serve. The other thing, as you look at the map, is just think about years ago, there was a very urban Fort Wayne system, and there was a very rural Allen County system, and those two merged together. And then obviously development has continued to happen in between, but a lot of times the county expansion portion of it has not kept up with the needs of what's been happening in our county and rural Allen County. And so I knew, being on this committee, that was one thing I wanted to make sure, is to say, make sure that those rural branches are set for the expansion that we're seeing, especially in the northern tier of Allen County. It's just been very important for us to respond to those needs. Having been somebody who lives in that area and uses that DuPont branch as our local branch as a family, it's definitely in need of, expansion on those things, but also to see the hundreds. I mean, it just seems like every time we open up the paper, every 2 weeks, there's another housing plan approved for another 500 or 600 or 700 houses that are going to be built in that area. It's just our responsibility to make sure that we're expanding the system to serve, and that can't be served by one branch in the DuPont area. We also saw a gap between the Tecumseh and Little Turtle branches and DuPont. There's a lot of northern Fort Wayne and a lot of population in that area that's not necessarily having close access to that. Trails have expanded, sidewalks have expanded. There's lots of opportunity there for us to make sure we can find a location to relocate the new DuPont branch somewhere that might be a little further south. Again, we don't exactly know where. We've had other people say, well, where are you going to put these things? What are you going to do? We can't answer that. That's the next phase, and we're going to hopefully get there. The public funding process is also unique. So anybody who's been a part of this, you can't always get the answers you need in the steps that you want to take. If we wanted to spend millions and millions of dollars to determine these sites and all that, to Marty's point, we would make the decision before we ever came to the public to say, give your input. So I believe we're doing it the right way. Get the response, I back up your comment on that, get the responses from the community on draft plans, and ultimately we're coming out with a plan that is kind of a combination of both options A and B that we looked at. So option C here with 15 branches seems to make sense on that end of it. The one thing, I've spent my entire career in nonprofit work and community development work, and I spent a lot of my volunteer time in community development work as well. I think that if I look across all of the organizations and systems and even government services that are available and things along those lines, our libraries have been one of the most consistent things, especially in our rural communities. When I look at how our rural communities have changed over the years, and I've talked about this privately, but whenever I was operating the Cornerstone Youth Center in Monroeville, we had 5 different churches in Monroeville alone. We had 13 different churches in Southeast Allen County that we're serving, and a majority of them had full-time pastors that could pour into the community and give services and give all kinds of things. Those numbers have drastically dwindled as we look at things today. And so when we look at what has stayed consistent to keep our communities and our community centers, active and working and our communities vibrant, the libraries have always been there. They really have. And so for me, I want to make sure that as a community that we're investing in our libraries, because they're the tried and true space that has offered, and they're open to anyone from that standpoint. And we continue to be expanding what that means to make sure everybody has services that they need on that end. So I'm happy to be to this point, but I know that we've got a lot of work ahead of us from that standpoint. It's just the start in a lot of ways that we've kind of reached this. Now, it's still an iterative process. So we still want input to this, and while this is the plan in front of us today, and I believe we're going to be moving this forward to accept this plan as something that we move forward on today, we're still receiving public input as we go about these phases. So we'll just get more and more detailed with that public input. So, as site selection happens, there might be opportunities for public input. As design happens, there's opportunities for public input. And that's just going to be the way we want it to be as a library system. So I want to make sure that we're, supporting it the way we can. And I want to thank all the patrons who have given. We've heard numbers, given input. We've heard numbers today, but that doesn't count the dozens of conversations that all of us have personally had with people that aren't even documented anywhere. and the emails that we've received or the phone calls we've received to ask about that, or the outreach to county council that some of us have done, and commissioners and people like that, just to get input into what we're thinking about doing. All been very important in the process. So I'm thankful to be a part of it, and I just want to make sure that we're, investing in our communities, that we're investing in our libraries as the center of those communities, and that the libraries at the end of this come out being better in the future than they are today, and they already do a significant amount of change in our community today, and I want to see that service grow.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you, Kent. I've always believed that libraries are the people's palace, and that each patron is either a king or a queen or a prince or a princess, and should have full access to the wealth that our libraries provide. I think this process, while it has been discussed in somewhat detail, is only the beginning of the next version that will require input and common sense and feedback and assistance from the community. I think the issue that is important to me is that this is done in the public fishbowl, that this is an iterative process that not only encourages but demands iterative feedback so that we can adjust, even though the board members have a good sense of where the library is and where it might be going. Public input is important to help us course correct, because we don't have a universal knowledge of whatever is important and necessary. As was seen today, the first two options that were presented several months ago were quite different, especially with the southeast branch of Shawnee. Hopefully that's an underscoring of the fact that the consultants and the board listened to what the public had to say and will be saying throughout the entire process. All that being said, we've talked a lot, but let me throw it open to the board for discussion with the consultants or with among ourselves. Does anyone have? Sharon?
Sure, I can make a comment. I really just want to continue to draw attention to the fact that not only has this board been open to and receptive of the public comments, but actually been flexible to make that change. I know many of you have heard me make comments about equity and equality and how that differs. In this program, I think that we can be proud of ourselves for taking the lead to make sure that we are providing equality across neighborhoods, providing what each neighborhood needs. And in a government body, that's special and important that we are able to do that. Being able to meet the new needs that are up in the DuPont area, up in the Carroll area, northwest corner, being able to answer and meet the needs for Southeast are different. Those needs are different, but we were able to listen to the community and provide the needs as best as possible to make sure that we are serving our patrons to the best of our ability. And for that, I can say I am proud of the work that the committee has put in and proud to be here to support the library and continue serving the work that we do. Not every entity listens to the public as deeply as this board has. I know there'll be a lot of things that we have moving forward to make sure that we are listening to the community on, and I'm glad that we are flexible and willing to do that.
Does anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, I'll make just a quick comment. I agree. I appreciate what the work that everybody's put in, particularly the Capital Committee. You guys put a lot of time in on this. And it has evolved. The plan has evolved, which is very refreshing to see, and I think it's a good plan. I think most of you know that I consider myself fairly fiscally conservative, and have tried to focus on the operating expenses here at the library over the years. In some ways, I don't think we've done as good a job as we probably could have in the past, but I think it's getting better. I think we owe it to the taxpayers as we go through this process to essentially echo what Dave said earlier. We really need to focus on what our operating expenses are going forward with this. As you know, from the most recent state report, they went up considerably in the past year, which still strikes me as a little odd given that we were shut down in so many areas and all of that. So throughout the rest of this process, and it's at least my time on the board, I want to make sure we continue to focus on that, and I believe that we will, but certainly support the plan. It's a great plan. It's very important.
Anyone else?
I'm going to take it to a different direction. I'm sitting here and I have a smile on my face because libraries also mean a great deal to me, as it does to probably all of you who are sitting around this table. But I'm also reminded about a gentleman who came over from Europe whose family and himself had nothing. They lost everything. And they came, and this gentleman worked very hard and amassed a fortune, by the way, billions of dollars. And he remembered back when he was about 18 years old, and he loved books because he had people around him who lent him books, and he was so gratified by that. But at the library where he had to go, he had to pay $2 to use the library, and he felt that was very unnecessary because $2 was a lot of money back there in the 1800s. And so he wrote a letter to one of the newspapers asking, he said that this is not correct. A library should be free to everyone. He got his $2 back, but they still charge a $2 fee for everybody else. So if you don't know who this man is by now, you know Mr. Carnegie. He was the one who really believed in libraries and making libraries open to all of us, regardless of anything about us, who we were, what race we were, what culture we were from, what economic status we were. He felt libraries were the thing that kept us going and provided knowledge to all of us whenever we wanted it and whenever we needed it, or even realized we even needed it. But we took it, we embraced it, and throughout his time, with his billions of dollars, he made 1,600, I believe, Carnegie libraries. Now, he was an astute gentleman. He was a businessman, of course. So he would pay for the building, but the people who chose to build it had to take over all of those operational costs, knowing that if you can't give someone something for free without asking for something in return, because then it becomes the people's library and not just a Mr. Carnegie library. So I am so excited, and those of you on the committee, I commend you and I give you a round of applause. It's been a lot of hard work, I know, on your end, but you should be proud of yourselves, and the community should be proud of themselves for all taking the time and the input so that we can come up with a plan that's going to last us for decades. So thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Jim?
Well, I will make it short. I really want to thank the community for all their involvement. I appreciate the consulting firm and the interest and the openness of this board. I've been around for a few years on this board, and I've seen an evolution to more of a openness. And I want to thank the board. I want to thank all the other entities that went into the process that we currently have produced, and just hope that we're continuing to be on the right side of what the community wants, in keeping with the finances, in keeping with the traditions. And basically, I really want to thank the community, though.
Thank you, Jim. Well, this now takes us to the public comment. I can read most of the handwriting here. If I screw up your name, please forgive me. But first one I do know, Fred Gilbert. Fred, if you come up to the microphone.
Over here.
Sure.
I'm here. Again, my name is Fred Gilbert. I live at 12513 Hildebrand Road. And spending 47 years of marriage with a librarian has bent my attitude a lot, and to the positive. But as a resident of Allen County, when we moved here in '74, truly priceless priceless membership in this library. Is the greatest value of any resident that can move into this county. And over the years, we've watched many things. I've watched the process that you've engaged with here in that you've got some beautiful examples of public input. Initially, I looked at the plans, and I am so grateful that you will focus good things on the central city and the east. I spent 33 years as a refugee caseworker, welcoming people from 29 different countries, and watched their participation in the library system as one of the most powerful examples of what we do as Americans in terms of the way the libraries welcome people, made it so easy in so many cases, you know, for them to access it. Appreciated Dr. Shamanoff's comments at the last Northwest board meeting, emphasizing the potential for a new branch in the Northwest area. She's always been a great salesperson for libraries and kids, and she knows my work. Initially, I would like to spend more time tonight talking to you about Mr. Amun. Mr. Amun was born in Amun, Israel, some 37,000 years ago. But this Mr. Amun was born in the Allen County Library, in your Maker's Lab. To buy this online would be around $400. But thanks to Duke University and their digital library system, we were able to print it here for $40. It involved a lot of process. And the Maker's Lab was key to that. And I've worked with them for many years, building on a collection. Right now, you don't have a scanner. You haven't had a scanner for about 2 years. And since Fort Wayne Community Schools has adopted a tech venture that's going to be moving into the new electric works, that part of that will be 3D printing. If I had known 3D printing in high school, I would never have become a social worker. It is a magical system. Thousands and thousands of things are available online. And your Maker Lab staff is just so good at helping people navigate what is a mystifying system. And I will urge you to get a scanner. A scanner allows someone to take a modeling clay, model a jaw, copy it online, or copy it with the scanner, and then print it in plastic so it can be integrated into another product. This includes toys and all kinds of stuff. But again, it's a fascinating system, but it cannot function well without a good scanner. And I will urge you to do that. I'm essentially also want to commend the planning. It looks really good. And again, the emphasis on that 03, 07, 06 zip code areas is critical. And so many of our new people have no other resource than this library. And it's a proud thing you have done. So I would like to introduce you to more of the Maker product, but I'll let other people talk.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pamela?
Hello again. Happy National Library Week indeed. I cannot thank you enough for having come to Shawnee and for listening to the patrons in the community that showed up to tell you how much they love Allen County Public Library and Shawnee Branch in particular. It's such a great day to hear this. I'm so grateful and appreciative. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Robert Alfeld?
Hello. Thank you for your service and all that you've done. This is, I really like it. I just got a couple questions about it, okay? I still bring up the thing of the little turtle. It is the second oldest library at 82 years. I know the report showed 70. It was built in 1972, but it was purchased then. That's the only point I wanted to bring up. The other point was trying to understand when we say population served, what do we mean by that? How's that determined? I'd like to, if somebody could give that to me later, it'd be great. The third thing is, you're coming off of a pandemic. You're coming off of inflation at 7.5 to 8% in the early 80s. And it was interesting that Mr. Kastman brought up about the library, the Fort Wayne and the rules, how they came together. If you go back and look at the history, as I talked about in the last time, that was done by an error, a printing error. And that's how we got the Allen County Public Library. That was a good error. But the state wasn't going to let it happen. But being with that, the last part of that, we do know we need to build a new jail. How's that going to impact property tax cost for people coming out of this pandemic and with this inflation rate, war going on, a lot of stuff going on. And I just think as a board, you being fiduciaries, you're trying to balance everything. You've done a great job, but just something I think we might want to consider. And that's really the points I want to bring up.
Thank you,
Thank
Robert.
you.
Thank you. Joe Lewis, and I can't read the last name.
Sapling?
Stamlitz.
Yes.
Okay, Joe, you're up.
Believe it or not, I'm 73 with this hair. Disabled veteran from 69, commander 11 times. But I've been in business 35 years in this town with my own corporation, real estate 19 years, home inspector, building inspector 20 years. I got issues on all these things, but my main one is Georgetown, out close to where I live. I recommend this to somebody, to build a 20 by 80 foot, 2-story building next to it. We do not want the building next door. We don't want that bank building. Leave that alone. That's one issue. Next issue out south, I don't know what they want to do for sure, but I got land I could recommend them looking at on Decatur Road, close to Tillman Road. It used to be a trailer park. It's empty now. You get that land, real cheap land, to build a new building out there. Or 10,006 BFW right across the street from Lucent Homes. That's a big lot there. Maybe put a place right there also, one of the two. I got other issues I can go on and on and on with, but that's the main issues right there. I know what I'm doing. I am a coma survivor, but I got a good mind. I got a good brain. I'm on Social Security. But I want to help out, and I've been coming to this place for many, many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Rebecca Weiser. Is Rebecca here? No, I don't see her. Yes, sir. Would you like to just come up?
Thank you.
And just give us your name if you would?
I will. My name is Alan Grinsfelder, and I've been involved with David, Stephanie, Susan, Jim, on various activities. And one of the things I've found is we've had people here at the library that had a lot of foresight and imagination. Fred Reynolds on the genealogy, and I also found out, I was lucky, I was in Garrett to look at a photography exhibit, and I found that we had purchased for practically nothing the albums that this photographer had made of the Native Americans, and today we have that, and it's worth millions of dollars. So I just want to say, I agree we need, and I commend the architect and planners for their study, but we also have to think a little bit beyond that, especially when it comes to building operations and maintenance. I don't know whether we've discussed electric works and whether we've thought about putting something there or down on the Superior Street area with all the development that's going around of how to expand ourselves, whether to think in terms, we're one of the music capitals of the United States with Sweetwater, whether even putting in studios for musicians to practice in some of the branches, or artists to have a studio where they can pay to rent space to do their artwork. And I'm a quote, artist. So I really think we should keep things flexible, and so that in 10 or 20 years from now, we've investigated a lot of these changes that we're going to be experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to comment? If not, then let me turn it back.
At one point, is there anybody online? I think we need to
Oh, yeah, anybody online? Nobody online? Or no comments? Soap operas instead of comments. Okay.
Ben, I do want to say something, though, that as we've been discussing process of public comment and things along those lines, with the era of COVID, public comment can be received online in some of our public hearings that we're going to have coming up for bonding.
Correct.
And in that instance, if anybody gives a comment online, you can't just be using your username of, I have no idea what your, whatever it would be. You're going to need to state your name and your address online, followed by your comment, in order for those to be entered into official public comment. So I just want to make sure people come prepared for that for the 21st and 28th meeting, that needs to be done. It just can't be a bunch of letters or some kind of made-up name that we can't tell who you are, because we need to make sure that it's residents of Allen County who are responding with that public comment. And so that's just one form to just make sure people are prepared to respond to.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Right, and I guess I would only say, at the beginning of each of those meetings, we need to make that clear then, so people understand it at the time, so.
Marty, would you like to make a recommendation?
I do. At this point, I would like to, basically, it's in the form of a motion that we will vote on, but as follows: that this board acknowledges receipt of the facilities master plan as presented, and recognizes that this plan, A, establishes the framework for the current anticipated solution to the long-term facility needs of the library community, B, provides the library board and administration with the maximum anticipated cost for this solution, excluding any land acquisition costs and financing costs, and C, becomes one of the library's primary resources during the development and refinement of this long-term facility solution by the library and the community.
May I have a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? If not, then, all in favor of the motion, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed by nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you for your effort, your time, your energy, and the ballgame has just begun. I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
Second, we are adjourned. Thank you. Okay, that was a good presentation.